Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ask the Expert webinar, Data Integration in SAS Viya. My name is Tiago de Souza, and I will serve as your moderator for today's event. Now, I would like to take a moment to introduce our presenter, Lou Galway, a Principal Business Solutions Manager here at SAS. Lou is focused on helping SAS customers transition to Viya, bringing over 15 years of experience supporting data management solutions and strategic partnerships. He plays a key role in enabling both sales teams and customers to understand and apply SAS technology effectively. Lou has worked across a wide range of industries and customer sizes, offering deep technical insight and practical guidance throughout the analytics journey. Lou, please take it away.
Hopefully now everyone can see today's presentation. Again, it's data integration in SAS Viya. Really the focus is looking at moving from SAS 9 to Viya. And really what I want to do is explain to you some things, something we call SAS Data Engineering, what that is about. Talk about some differences you'll notice between SAS Viya and SAS 9. Hopefully give you some reasons why you want to get excited about SAS Viya and move to Viya. Once you've seen that, we'll talk about how do we get there. And lastly, take a quick peek at when you have a DI Studio job, what does it look like in Viya? Is it totally new? What happens to it in that process? So we'll take a look at that as well. So we'll get started, and I always like to start presentations or frame things from the data and analytics lifecycle. And today's focus is really on the data side, as we're talking about data integration, what we do with it. And SAS's offering is comprehensive, and we talk about accessing data, manipulating that data for analytics, and governing it all the way through the analytics lifecycle. So even though here it's kind of set here on the left side of the screen, data follows all the way through the results and how you disseminate those results, or how you might be making decisions and utilizing them. It's really throughout that whole process. The other piece here I would like to mention is as you migrate from SAS 9 to
Lou,
Viya.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to make sure that we're sharing the correct screen and that we're also presenting it from the slideshow from beginning view.
As I mentioned, I was kind of going through what I expect to talk today to you about in terms of what our offering is in the data integration space with SAS Viya, what's different, why, to give you some excitement, some reasons why you might consider or want to move to SAS Viya, how do we get there, and finally, what it actually looks like.
Lou, sorry to interrupt one more time. If you could click on the hide
yes.
at the bottom.
Yep.
Sorry, that's the last time. Go ahead.
That's all right. No problems. You would think today was Monday for me. But anyway, as I mentioned before and went through the data analytics life cycle, data is really a part of the entire life cycle. For today, it's really focused on what we're doing, and from I'd say a DI Studio user's lens. Doesn't mean that if you're not a user, you won't find this information useful, but this is really focused on how we take a typical DI Studio job and move it to Viya, and when it comes over as a SAS Studio flow. If you've heard SAS Studio before, you may have heard it in a context of SAS 9. If you're new or haven't seen this in a while, SAS Studio is an interface in SAS Viya where those jobs will get migrated, and you'll have the ability to create new flows as well. So that's the primary focus of today's session. So let's talk a little bit about what is data engineering. How would I define it? And the first thing I would say, it's a data management offering for SAS Viya. And it includes, just like if you're coming from DI Studio, the ability to access data, manipulate the data for analytics, refine it, and govern that data. So it's really a comprehensive set of tools for preparing data for analytics and AI. There's things that are new about it we'll talk about in terms of when we say any data source or format. I'm really hinting at some of the open source formats like Parquet, and we'll have a bit of discussion of where that data actually lives and how you would connect that data to SAS, whether it be on-premise or on cloud, so that your data is safe within the SAS applications and is timely and cost effective. So within the data engineering offering, it has all the things if you're SAS DI Studio customer that you would expect it to have. Plus, there's more capabilities there to look forward to. As I mentioned, the open source data formats, I think, becomes a big bright spot for use in SAS Viya. So the integration capabilities of being able to seamlessly integrate, but I'll compare and contrast them in a few minutes, but the data quality pieces there, what you see in this list is really all of these things are integrated into the SAS Viya platform. In my opinion, it's a unified approach to it where everything is in one place. It makes it easier for users to move around and do different things and go back and forth as you're looking at creating your data processes. So the governance capabilities, we'll talk about lineage and an information catalog, a business glossary, those types of capabilities, being able to transform the data and different processes. A lot of data transforms that you've done in DI Studio are available in the SAS Viya platform, in SAS Studio. And there's work to continue there, as it's not a one-for-one just yet, but there's a lot of work that's been done in the last year to catch up there, and we'll have some more discussion around that. There is capabilities for data enrichment. In data enrichment, I'm talking about things of enhancing the data, whether it be things like address verifications, adding geocodes, those types of things to enrich the data in which we're working with and preparing for the analytics, as well as the ability to control and govern access of the data as it is in the SAS Viya application. You would expect that in modern times, the ability to collaborate, which we had some of that capability as well in the SAS 9 world, and things like Git integration. That is here also to help you manage your code and share the code, as well as the idea of, I'll talk more about custom steps, but they're user-defined data transformations as you build your flows out. I think they're more powerful than what was in DI Studio. Well, as I mentioned, we'll talk more about that. The ability to add advanced analytics within your flows. And I'll talk more examples such as adding decisioning there, how that might play into taking your flows to a more sophisticated level of use cases, as well as scalability to be able to handle large volumes of data. And I think that kind of gets back to the topic I mentioned around some of the open source formats like Parquet and how we interact with those. And lastly, I missed the real-time processing, the ability to work with IoT and how that flows in there is part of the data engineering capabilities. So drawing into some contrast to some things here is, I think, some broad categories. And the first thing I think that stands out between the two in the offering is the platform itself and the architecture, where SAS DI Studio was primarily designed to be an on-premise deployment. Viya and SAS Studio is a cloud-native application that supports both on-premise and in the cloud deployments. But it has these compute engines that support both an SMP, which is a symmetric multiprocessing, and MPP. And this is the first hint with the MPP, which means the massively parallel processing, the ability that your DI jobs could run faster. We'll talk about why I chose the word could, because they should be assessed as to whether or not you would make any changes to go that route. Otherwise, you may find your jobs run just fine without making any of the changes. That's part of something I'll talk about a little bit later in our content assessment and how we get there. But these engines, there's capabilities to be very similar to what you're used to in SAS 9. If you think of a workspace server, or if you're using grid where you're sending your jobs to be processed, would be analogous to what we call SAS compute. But there's also what we call CAS, the Cloud Analytics Services, which is an in-memory capability, is another compute engine that's there. As well as there's others that we call like microanalytic services as a way to send jobs as an API. We can do things in a self-contained runtime container that affectionately known as Soccer. And we also continue our ability to do end database processing, that continues to evolve. So the architecture of where you want to process the data really is enhanced with the Viya platform. On the user interface, the DI Studio is a thick client, and so it's tailored for data integration tasks. SAS Studio and Viya is more of a it is a browser-based interface that allows users to do multiple different tasks, not just data integration tasks. As I mentioned, I talked about intelligent decisioning could be added into and run from these flows. So it depends on your use case. So your ability to do more types of tasks as a data engineer is enhanced with your different types of capabilities that are available throughout the Viya platform. On the integration and extensibility piece, it primarily was looking at SAS 9 applications or tools and solutions. Viya has a bunch of REST APIs. So when you think about building applications and interacting with other data sources, or building out things to be more like applications as opposed to just a data flow, these are things that can Viya really supports. It could be exporting, for example, metadata that's within SAS Viya platform out to an external for a bigger picture, as in to use in a more enterprise governance example. Also here, there is more open source integration, and I think that's really powerful in the sense that, yeah, you can write Python or R code within SAS Viya and SAS Studio, but you could be building a data flow, which is similar to what we call a data job in DI Studio, that includes both Python and SAS. So you get the best of both worlds to get to a better outcome. And lastly, the focus on the analytics itself and machine learning with capabilities. It's just deeper and broader in the SAS Studio side than what we were doing on the DI Studio pieces. So some of the reasons why, we talk about, some of the advantages I mentioned, but we have a third party that did a study last year and compared SAS Viya against some others, and the results came back that Viya was faster. So we look at productivity, cost, and performance, and we can see SAS coming out on top. But more importantly, what struck me about this study was when you break it down into some of the tasks of going from start to finish with an analytical process that starts with data engineers, that ends up with data scientists and the outputs, the productivity was really high on the data side. And why is that? Well, a lot of it had to do with the ability of not having to write a lot of code to do things. So in these tasks, it started with accessing the data, assessing the data. So think of data quality, profiling, validating data, cleaning that data, manipulating that data to then build and train models, as well as running those models. A lot of that with the low code capabilities of these data flows made that very easy to use and get through the process much faster as compared to the others. If you'd like to know more information about that study, in this presentation, there's a link to download the reports and look at the details of what I'm referring to. But the idea behind this is for you to see there's productivity gains, potentially cost savings, as you look at utilizing SAS Viya, and particularly SAS Data Engineering as an offering. When we're looking at preparing data for analytics to help get you excited and move towards there. Okay, so what does it actually look like? So SAS Data Engineering is made up of all of those components. So I'm going to kind of walk through what some of those interfaces can look like and how they could be used. And so the first piece, if I start at the beginning, if I have an analytical question, when I've met with customers, a lot of times they don't know what data they have access to. So they don't even know what information is available to me. Well, with an information catalog where you've connected your data sources here, they could search it. They can see what data they have access to and find it, as well as understand that data and understand the health of that data. So there's things that we do in the information catalog you can search and understand. I'll show you a brief presentation of this in just a little bit to kind of go along with the data governance capabilities in the data engineering offering. There's a business glossary. So if you remember in SAS 9 and the data flex capabilities, we had a, excuse me, it was called the Business Data Network. That information can be migrated over and utilized here in SAS Viya, or can be created here if that's capabilities that you are looking for in a data governance piece as it relates to your processing. Lineage is also available in the data engineering pieces, where we can see, in this case, this is a flow, and seeing tables coming in that produce outputs and where they might be used next. So this also talks about the relationship and capturing that, where that could be used in other places in an enterprise governance view, or if you subscribe and use the open metadata community, that we also interact with that as well. But this is an easy way to understand how a table is being used, where and what assets within the Viya system. And that could be not just tables and jobs, but it could be reports and models, decision flows, and others that show up here. So it's really, how's that data being utilized across the SAS Viya platform. Reference Data Manager, if you remember those as well, can be used here in Viya. A lot of times it can be used as a nice lookup feature in your SAS Studio flows. That is there as well. The integration piece, I think this is kind of the bread and butter pieces of what SAS Studio offers in terms of data flows and how you build them and how they come over from DI Studio. There are things in here in the past where the QKB, which is the quality knowledge base that we use a lot of the data quality definitions to make it easier to clean and parse and mass data. Those capabilities are all in one place here. If you see on the left-hand side, there's a list of different transformations. In SAS Viya, they're really known as SAS steps, and there can also be custom ones created as well, and we'll talk a little bit more about those. But here's an example that has some of the more frequently used steps that you can find within SAS Viya and SAS Studio. But it also, if you look at this, it goes deeper into the analytics side in terms of managing models, machine learning, and as things have advanced, those are there as well. There are common flow things such as cleaning up data or joining queries, filtering rows, that sort of thing, branching rows as you go through your flows. These are all available, what you would expect coming from use cases with from DI Studio. The custom steps, I really like this in SAS Studio because it really gives the users, whether you're a technical user or non-technical user, to make things a lot easier to use. So you can design them, and this capability was similar to capabilities that was available in SAS DI Studio in creating user-defined transforms or even user-defined code nodes. You can do that here also, but this really goes, I think, a step further, that in making it easier for users who might be using this but also like the point and click type and don't necessarily want to get deep down into code, this is a way to make it easier for them, so that once it's been developed and can be shared, others can use it in their flows as well. It can be a standalone, or it can be a step that you might go through. And in this example, it's actually using translating some foreign languages to another as kind of a service to load into a table. But it could be any number of different use cases. And this is, I think, very different than what you see in DI Studio, in the sense that we have a way on GitHub to crowdsource these things. So if there's tasks that you are utilizing or creating or want to do and maybe don't know how to do or interested, you can download them from this site and use in your data flows. So that is something that's constantly evolving as users dream up new ways of using or manipulating data. They can share how they're doing that as a custom step. Also, we have the ability to manage code. When, again, this was available previously, but I think doing this more so now to help collaboration and sharing your code or advancing your code, this is a great way to do that. And I mentioned earlier some of the open source pieces. And so this is, within SAS Studio, instead of writing a SAS program, you're writing a Python program, could be R as well. But what you do with that code then could be to put it into a flow to then create your preparation for the analytics-based tables. And so you're mixing and matching what you might find more effective with Python or know how to do with Python, but maybe not so much in SAS. Now you have the ability to put that in a data flow and move it through. So this also kind of, I think, is really helpful with some of the customers I've met, and maybe they've been using SAS for a number of years and they have processes deeply embedded in SAS that they run. But some of the newer things they're doing in some of the open source languages. The SAS Viya, and particularly in the SAS Data Engineering, this is a place where those two things can kind of be combined together. So you get this hybrid of users, not just SAS users, but they can be open source users, and they can work together to create processes that produce better outcomes for the analysis. And so that's really what's meant when we talk about the extensibility of the data engineering, and more broadly terms in SAS Viya, is the ability to, we talk about accessing the data. Well, some of these new open data source formats, whether it be Parquet or Iceberg or Delta Lake, those types of formats, and working with them through SAS. But it's really not just SAS teams, it's Python teams, hybrid teams, all going to one place to work on these issues and move them forward to produce results. So I've talked a bit about these capabilities, and so I'd like to kind of show you what this looks like at a higher level holistically within what SAS Viya. So I'll start this by saying this is just a basic report off of some customer data. Nothing really special about it. This is visual analytics that is part of the data engineering offering. And this report is based off of a table. And that's the table we want to understand more about the data itself and where did it come from, the health of that data. And so we'll go back and we'll go to the information catalog and find that table. So the first thing you can see, this catalog is made up of lots of different assets that not only include data, but reports, rule sets and decision flows, the data flows that are in SAS Studio. So these are all the types of objects within the SAS platform that you're able to search for in the catalog. So when you do that, it has a search window here that we'll want to enter in what we know. And in this case, I know the name of the table that we want to utilize. So we'll look for that in the results and we find it. I'm also, sorry about that. Find it in the table and utilize it and look for some of the results of this. Okay, once we find that table, you can quickly see some information about that table, where in the past you might have run something like proc contents. There's a lot more information here on these tables, and this is actually the table that we loaded into CAS to know how big of a table this is, what kind of status is there. Is there, some way to summarize what's in this table? And this summary is something that's AI generated, so that when you analyze the table ahead of time, when the people come in to find the table, they can understand what data is actually in this table, as well as the health of it. So in this case, they can be hidden or given access to some people using it until it's ready. And then if we can look at individual columns and see, whoops, I apologize for my clicking here. Let me just pause it right here for a second. In this view, you can see the customer ID, and there's some data quality measures as it relates to complete and uniqueness, which also means that it could be flagged or classified as a good candidate for a primary key. So as you do the analysis and it goes through and runs different data quality measures against it to produce this report, now you can begin to see and understand how you might want to use this table for that report I was just showing you. We can look at other columns here, and you'll notice that with latitude and longitude, it actually is plotting those on a map. If we look at some of the categorical variables, we can see the frequency patterns and what they look like. We can also see, in this case, for male and female, the pattern, everything is within one letter. So it's either male or female based off of the distribution, and we see in the frequency. This is a pretty clean column, right? So it's this is kind of a way to look at this information and decide, do I need to do anything additional to this data before I use it in my analysis or building of models? And the same thing with age and looking at the skewness, standard deviation, or frequency distribution of those. And then, as I mentioned before, as a unified, once I understand what this information is telling me, what it looks like, what do I want to do next with this information? Do I want to directly go and create a report off of it? Would I use it to build a model? You can all pick through this screen in one place and move to what I want to do next with the data itself. In our case, we want to actually look at how this table was built. So moving to SAS Studio, which is develop code and flows, I have a flow already open here that shows a data flow of how that table was created and some things I did to it afterwards in terms of loading that data to CAS to be able to be utilized by visual analytics. Could also do some things as a step here to characterize the data. So much like some of the information we saw in the information catalog, it can be produced here as well. Each of these are data that are point and click. You can see the properties of them and preview the data, look at the query, you can see the join criteria, see the outputs, and then the capabilities of looking at characterizing the data, how I did that, what selections were made, instead of actually writing all the code to do that. When I look at the results, now I'm able to get very similar type of reports that we were seeing when we are getting some characteristics of each of the columns. If you have some SAS code that goes through a very similar process of, let's say this code is really taking a table and doing a query against it and running it, you can actually create a flow out of this. And you might want to create a flow out of this for a number of reasons. One might be to schedule it. Another could be you want to call this from an API. You know, this is where that flexibility of how you're using what's happening here. So it quickly creates the flow to produce a final outcome. In this case, I can run it and we'll see the output of the data, the preview. It looks very similar to that customer focus group table we've been looking at through this process. And the one last thing we might want to do to this is add that characteristic and understand, just to add it here to show you how some of these steps work. But also you can see all the different types of tasks or steps that can be run against the data as you think about building out your flows or bringing your flows over from DI Studio. So it's pretty easy to manipulate and drag and drop and point and click to the features you want to utilize or the parameters that are needed. Here we're just going to select a few of the columns needed. And I'm going to speed this up so that we can get through some of the other pieces of our presentation here. Once we run this, then we'll get similar results as we saw before. So the next part of this might be is, okay, let's take a look at, before we look at lineage, one last thing we might want to do is to take this particular job and schedule it, because you might want to run it on Mondays and Thursdays or whatever is appropriate. So there's a scheduling capability that you could utilize here to run these jobs at a time and interval frequency that makes sense for you. Okay. Now let's take a quick look at the lineage capability and where we look at what does it look like from a lineage perspective, what relationships between the tables and the objects here. So we'll search for that particular data flow we were just looking at and open that up. And we can see the tables that are inputs and the outputs of that table. We could also look from a different view or a different lens of, okay, if I created this output table that was loaded to CAS, what's using it? And that's the sample reports table that I showed you at the beginning. So we're right back to where we started from at the beginning of this presentation. So just to kind of put all the pieces together of the capabilities and show you it is unified, how easy it is to move around, and what it looks like is a quick preview of it. Okay, so now let's talk about how do we get there? How do we get there if I'm a SAS 9 customer, I'm using DI Studio, what do I need to think about, or how would I get to be able to use SAS Viya? So there's tools in what we call the ecosystem diagnostics, and it's made up of kind of two categories or two utilities. One is called the SAS 9 content assessment. This is something that really does an inventory of your SAS 9 system. It can be downloaded, it's free of charge, and really helps you understand what you have in your SAS 9 system. SAS ESM, or the Enterprise Session Monitor, this is a way to understand your SAS 9 workloads. How long are these jobs taking to run? And I mention it that way as an example because if you have jobs that take a long time to run, those are the ones that we might identify as we move to Viya of how we might improve the performance of those. And there are ways to do that through the architecture or some of the new capabilities and working with the SAS Viya platform. So how we go through this is the first understand your content. Once you can understand the content that you have, you can build a plan as to how you move forward through there to migrate your SAS 9 content to Viya. And finally, you would validate it. But one thing I want to mention here also is, oops, let me go back a slide. This also is I want to talk about is when you move your content, I also want to make sure we're talking about our data. We also have the ability to help have a discussion and help you plan with what's going to happen to your data, whether you have a SAS 7 BDAT data estate. Are you going to move it to the cloud? Should you move it to the cloud? Does it all need to move there, right? These are all part of things where when we take an inventory, we understand what's there, but we need to have those conversations or give some thought as to what it's going to look like or how we interact with that data when we get to running it, working with it in SAS Viya. So as I was mentioning on the data side from SAS content, it's going to tell us what data is there in DI Studio jobs. But it's also going to tell us and get us to look at, are some jobs more important than others? How often are they run? Do you have content there that's kind of dead weight? They're not being used anymore. And then there's the question of, well, any of these items need to be modified. What changes would need to be made? Will your data change? Well, the first clue is when you run the content assessment, it's going to provide you on the content of the migration status. So as I mentioned, as an example, those steps, those transforms, if something is not there, it'll still come over. It'll come over as a code node. Some customers are okay with that. Some customers, they really want to know ahead of time so that there's not surprises there. But you also, in this process, as I mentioned, in talking about the data, what needs to change? Well, one of the things that will need to change most likely is how you're connecting to that data. So your library, your line name statements, and if they're, let's say, pointing to a file name system, a file share system, that's not going to perhaps be the same when you move to the cloud. And so there could be different locations. And so if you've got thousands of jobs, how would you do that? How would you manage that process? So there are capabilities to identify those, automate making those changes, and to be able to have a smooth path forward in migrating not just the content, but also knowing where your data is going to be so that your jobs remain performant. So more specifically with DI Studio content, you're going to identify those highly leveraged code or no code, low code jobs and projects, right? You're going to identify the ones that you're going to want to move over and migrate. And they're going to migrate to the SAS Studio flows as we were just looking at. And the quality of it depends on, well, which transformations and tasks you've used. In the content assessment, it's going to identify those that will come over one for one and those that may need some additional tweaks, or it's going to come over as a code node. The code will still run. That's not an issue. It's more of an expectation I think customers have of what they expect it to look like. And so some of those transforms, as I mentioned, will come over as those code steps. And I think there's kind of a choice you can make. You can leave it alone. And as that code node becomes a transform that is available in the Viya platform, you can remigrate that flow and it will pick that up. Or there could be things you do with creating custom steps to make that process easier. I had a customer a few years ago, they were really looking for that summary capability to run at the end of a table they had created. And so at that time, that transformation wasn't available in Viya. It doesn't mean they couldn't get the results, but what they were really after was being able to pick and choose some things. And that's where custom steps could come in and help. Now, if you caught earlier, that transformation is now available. So now the other option for that customer would be is to remigrate that job so that it comes over cleanly. Okay, let's talk a little bit about what does this actually look like. This is a simple screenshot of a simple job in DI Studio. If your DI Studio customer should look very familiar to you. When I migrated it over to DI Studio, it looks pretty much the same. There may be some things different about it. Icons look a little different, but it follows the same path. So how did I get there? One is the first thing you need to do when you migrate your content is you need to make sure that you can connect your data to Viya. Where is it going to find those? And those are that mapping of, where's my data that this job is expecting to see, and does it see it correctly? The next part of that is exporting that DI Studio job as a package, a SAS package. So that's very easy to do manually if you go into DI Studio and right click and say export as package. Then you can import that package into SAS Viya in the SAS Environment Manager. That is a very manual process that I just talked about. And if you're a large customer and you have thousands of jobs, the point and click manual way is great to understand what's happening, but you'll want to automate that. And that's where the CLI and the content assessment come in to play to help you automate those. And so there are some things in the past SAS Innovate we just had about a month ago where there's some presentations I'll put some links to that you can see to see some of these automation tools. But also I would highly encourage you to go out to YouTube, and there is a migration planning playlist. So I've talked about things, I try to talk about it at a certain level of detail, but this process has been around for a number of years, and this process, I think, is not changed. I think what you find is, but particularly with content assessment, it's been refined and you get more information out of it to help you create a better plan and a better experience moving to Viya. So there's additional homework for you to dig deeper into details after our presentation here today. There's also a list of customers who've already moved to Viya, which will be in this presentation, that you could take a look and hear their stories of how they found moving to Viya and what they're up to. So this really kind of brings me towards the end of the presentation today, and I'd like to talk to you about what's next. And so when I looked at this presentation, I want you to think about, why would I move to Viya? And so hopefully today we've gone over some key concepts of why you would want to move to Viya, whether it be the architecture itself, productivity, cost reasons, performance, the idea of everything being in one place, one platform, and being able to govern that could be reasons that you find, as well as if this is something you're interested in going further with. We'd love to talk more to you about your specific use cases and how to get there. So I encourage you to reach out to your account team to begin that process. Take a look at the migration playlist and ask questions. And lastly, in this presentation, which should be available shortly, is some additional links for you for some of the presentations that were in SAS Innovate that you can see on YouTube, in terms of things that we talked about: modernizing to Viya, streamlining that process, how to automate that playlist again, and some things to think about in terms of the offering of SAS Data Engineering versus Data Engineering Advanced. So Tiago, I'd like to kind of stop here and see maybe if we have some questions we'd like to talk about.
Yes, thank you. With that, we will be moving into the Q&A portion of today's webinar. Just a quick reminder on how it works. If you would like to ask a question, simply type it into the Q&A widget located at the bottom of your screen. We would also love your feedback on our webinar today, so please take a moment to fill out a quick survey by clicking on the survey widget, also at the bottom of your screen. It is only 4 questions and should only take a minute to complete. Your feedback is super valuable to us, and we will use it to shape future webinars. All right, Lou, now on to our first question here. What is the overhead of the SAS content assessment? E.g., would you run it on prod during office hours?
I think that's your mileage could vary depending on how big of a SAS 9 deployment you have. So we do have customers that do run it during the day, or it could be kicked off. What it's really doing is parsing logs. So it's not meant to really tax your SAS system, but it is kind of a one-time, well, I won't say a one-time, but it is a snapshot in time to collect information of that. You may end up running it multiple times as you go through your planning process.
Gotcha. Thank you. Another question here: what are the ways to import DI jobs in Viya?
Sure. As I mentioned on one of the last slides I had, is there is a manual way, and I think it's always good to start the manual way to understand what the process is. There's a CLI as part of command line interface as part of the content assessment that'll help you collect information, and then there's some automation tools, which is why I added that link for the automating some of those. So for example, when you run content assessment and it's collecting where those line name statements paths are to the file system, you could then modify those as to where it will be when you move to Viya, and create that mapping as part of your process to run when you import them into SAS Viya in an automated way. So really kind of three ways, and very similar, and I think the automation is really geared towards helping those customers that have those big implementations of SAS 9.
Perfect. Thank you. Someone's asking, is there a list that shows which DI transforms are not available in SAS Studio yet, and what the planning is for making them available in SAS Studio, or whether any are not planned for being made available in SAS Studio?
That's an evolving thing. as we look at, actually, there's nothing that's publicly, but when you work with your SAS account team and you run the content assessment, it will flag what's available, what's not, but that's constantly being updated. So each month, there's a process that they go through and they update content assessment with what's available in Viya and what's not. And so it's a kind of a moving target. So that's that migration status piece. There are things that SAS can help you with where we have some internal documentation and can explain kind of where that is. So I would encourage you to look. I would say a large percentage is going to come over. There are some things, if you believe in some of the links you see that I put from the SAS Innovate presentations from this year, there are some things, particularly around the loop transformation, that are not quite there yet that we're working on, but most of the others should be a one-for-one, but it's something I think it's worth running the content assessment to see where that is.
Gotcha. Thank you. Another question here. Are there resources to help with migration?
Absolutely. Your SAS team is your first start to that. We have PSD services, professional services. We have partners. We have people in the group that I work in that can help with customers and their questions. We have a customer success group of folks that will help guide you through this process.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Someone asked, will the importer be able to translate every piece of existing SAS code to a flow?
Again, that's kind of an ongoing process. If it can't, what you'll see is a SAS code node. So I know it was probably kind of quick in the video that when I took that SAS code, I'm assuming, and if I'm taking this question out of context, I apologize. If you're talking about the SAS program that I used to convert, and I converted it, those were creating SAS code nodes, not necessarily, let's say, where it said SQL, the query node. But they could easily be enhanced once it was created.
Gotcha. Thank you. I'm afraid that's all the time we have for questions today. On behalf of myself, Lou, and all of SAS, we really hope that you enjoyed today's webinar. Thank you all, and have a great rest of your day.